In this video, we'll be setting up a Beelink ME Pro as a small NAS with TrueNAS, Ubuntu VM and OpenClaw. The Beelink has an Intel 95 processor and 12 GB of soldered DDR5 memory. The Beelink has a small form factor but a lot of connectivity. On the back you have 2.5 and 5 gigabit Ethernet, HDMI and USB-A ports. There is also one USB-C and a mini jack. On the back you also find the drive base for the 3.5-inch drives. These are SATA drives and are connected with screws. Underneath you find the drive bay for the M.2 drives. Here is also an Allen key that you can use to open most of the compartments for the small NAS. You also need a Phillips screwdriver for the M.2s, so this is required. The backplate is aluminium and leads the heat well away from the drives. Please note that the drive bays do not deliver the same speed. Port 1 is the fastest, and this is where the boot drive is normally mounted. In many setups, I would have moved the boot drive up to number 2 or 3, but since I'm using mirror drive for my M.2s, I will use them in slot 2 and 3 and leave the boot drive where it is. The drive bays are easy to add drives to. Just put the drive inside it and fasten the screws. The screws for the drive base is hard to connect because of the magnets close by, so a steady hand is required. I'm using TrueNAS as the operating system for my little server. I find the ISO file on TrueNAS.com and can download the community edition there. An ISO file will be downloaded and I need a program like Rufus to burn it to a USB memory stick. This is as easy as choosing the ISO file, selecting the correct drive, and pressing start. You will be asked a few questions. Normally you can just press OK and yes. Accept that the drive will be overwritten. When the boot device is finished, we can start preparing for installation. Connect power, HDMI and USB keyboard. The MI Pro has a boot menu at the F7 key. Select the USB drive in the boot menu. When you get to the drive selection, you will find all the drives that are connected to the machine. Select the correct one for the boot device. Set admin password, and the admin for TrueNAS is TrueNAS_admin. The installation process might take 5 to 10 minutes depending on your setup, but is very stable and works really well. When this is done, remove the memory stick and allow the machine to restart. After the installation, we will need one thing before we can disconnect the HDMI and screen from the device. We need the IP address that it has in the local network. On my computer, this is 192.168.1.142. With that information in hand, I can go over to my computer and the browser and configure the rest from there. It's very common to get a notification about the lacking of HTTPS for the TrueNAS when you try to access it in the browser. Accept this and log in. First thing we do is create a pool of drives. As you can see, I have 2 existing drives that already have information, but I have the 2 M.2s that are not initialized. I set them up in a mirror. That way I can lose one of the drives without losing any of the information. I continue. I add no log, no spare, no cache, no metadata, and no dedup. Review the information and create pool. Accept the warnings. After the storage pool is created, we'll add some data sets to it. This is to keep track of our different use cases, for instance, virtual machines, our apps, and our ISO files. The next step is to set up a static IP for our server. We find it by going to the System and Network tab. Select for static IP, add the IP address, and the subnet. /24 is the most used one. Add also gateway and DNS. For the change to take effect, we'll need to test the change. Update the change time to 120 seconds and do the test. After about 20 to 30 seconds, open a new browser window, input a new IP address, log in, and you will be asked to go back to the network settings to finalize the change over to the new IP address. TrueNAS is primarily a NAS software, but it also has apps and virtual machine support. We can add our Ubuntu virtual machine by giving it a name, selecting Linux, and setting a password for VNC. This is for remote control under installation. Set a couple of cores, host model, 4 GB of RAM is a minimum for a Ubuntu server install. Less than this can make it unstable under installation. Set up a drive on one of our datasets. 100 GB is a good start for our OpenClaw. Make sure you select the right network adapter. Select the ISO file that you want to install. If it's not there, you can upload it from your local machine. The reason I use a virtual machine for my OpenClaw instance is security, and also the fact that OpenClaw is in beta and easily breaks. Having it in a virtual machine separates it from my normal NAS and other services that I will install on it. We just press save, and the virtual machine will be set up for us. Next step is installation of Ubuntu on this virtual machine. Select running to start it up, and press display to see the port that you need to connect to via a VNC software. You also have to use the IP address of the NAS itself. The password is the password that you set under the virtual machine setup. The VNC works well for the basic installation, but after we have installed Ubuntu, we will use SSH and using PuTTY, because we can much more easily cut and paste code and commands with this. Select language and select the update the installer. Keyboard setup can be a bit problematic on a virtual machine, so I'm leaving this on English. The next page, we just continue. On network, we want to set a static IP address. Go to Edit IPv4, set manual. As the subnet, you put in your network address, but with a 0 at the end, and /24 for a standard subnet. Add the address you want for your server. Under address, gateway is the address for your router, and the name server is most often also the same as your router. Press tab to move around and press done. It will now test the internet connection, and when this is done, you can continue. Set up your drive. Just tab through until you get to done, unless you want a specific setup. Input your name, your desired server name, your username, and the password that you will use for connecting to the system. Since I will give OpenClaw access to most of this virtual machine, I'm using a password that I don't use anywhere else. I'm also installing OpenHHS, as I will use this for connecting to this virtual machine later on. When the installation is finished, press Reboot Now. You'll then have to go to the browser and your TrueNAS interface. Log in. Select your virtual machine and power it off. Go then into Devices and remove the CD-ROM drive as the first order boot device. Go back to Virtual Machines, and you can now run your virtual machine. It will take about a minute to boot. You can now go to PuTTY and input the IP address for your virtual machine. Log in with your stated username and password. When I first log in, I start by updating the system using sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade to actually install all the packets that are available. Accept the installation and move on. With both TrueNAS and the virtual machine ready, the next step is to install OpenClaw. This is mostly a simple task with a simple command from the openclaw.ai homepage, but often this will be a lengthy process with a lot of errors. But that is the price to pay for alpha or beta software. Under installation, you will verify that you understand that this is a beta program, that the security is dubious, and that you take responsibility for whatever happens. Select Quick Start. Select your LLM provider. I'm using OpenRouter, and add the API key. This you have to generate from the provider's homepage. Select the model you want to use for your OpenClaw main agent. I'm using KimiK 2.6. There's a lot of different ways you can communicate with OpenClaw. I'm selecting to skip this for now. And the only thing I will add is Perplexity search engine, since that will use the same API key as the OpenRouter key. Configure your skills. There is a lot of skills, but not all are useful for everyone or every use case. So read the text and select the ones that are most important for you. OpenClaw supports different types of hooks. Select the ones you want your systems to have access to. The next step is to hatch my main agent. I do this by answering some simple questions about my preferences to the AI and how I want it to respond and what I want it to do. After this is done, I will get information up about the dashboard, how I can connect to OpenClaw using a browser. In my installation, I had a problem with the path not being correctly set. So I had to check with an LLM and get the right command to get the path set correctly. After that, I could type OpenClaw dashboard to get the information I need to connect to the dashboard. To connect to the OpenClaw dashboard, we need a secure connection. By default, this is done using an HHS tunnel, copy out the command and add it to your CMD or PowerShell window. Accept the fingerprint and keep the window open after you have added the password for your OpenClaw instance. And copy in the localhost address. And you should be able to see the dashboard for the first time. As you can see, you have chat on top and a lot of different features and systems on the side. Now I'm ready to start using OpenClaw.